Walking on a the dash is digi, the schedule busy. My head in a hoodie, my shorty a goodie. My cousins are crazy, my cousins like boogie. Life is amazing, it is what it should be. Been here for 10, but I feel like a rookie. I tell her look up.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to our fourth series of the CQQC podcast. My name is Gabe, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Brian and Nate. And today, given that we're in May and technically the MLQ season should be kind of getting into the swing of things, obviously it's not. We wanted to have a little bit of fun and do an MLQ Canada series, what we're calling it. So we'll have a two-part segment here. We'll have our friends from the Toronto Raiders. They're going to talk first, and then later on we'll have the Ottawa Black Bears do a segment as well. So to introduce our guests, if you guys want to just kind of like briefly introduce yourself, your names, where you're coming from. We obviously know you, but we want our guests to kind of get to know you guys as well. So if you just want to briefly introduce yourselves. Yara, if you want to go first.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Yara. I am the head coach of the Toronto Raiders, returning for my second year in that role. Outside of the Raiders, I have been playing for Valhalla for the past 5 years, and I'm also the executive director of Quidditch Canada. So that is probably a sufficient involvement in Quidditch, but it doesn't stop there because I also have been coaching and managing Valhalla and for its brief appearance, Valfreya. So an extensive, varied, sometimes stressful, but mostly delightful journey through Canadian Quidditch.
That's awesome.
Should I be sharing non-Quidditch related things? That seems irrelevant though. Let's who's here to learn more about like Yara, the person behind the Quidditch broom, right?
Like, we get off track very easily, especially.
Okay.
All good.
Excellent. Well, that's inevitable in my case. Quarantine brain does that to me for sure.
Awesome, that's great. And then Zach, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, so I'm Zach. I am the beater coach for the Raiders. I'm returning for this year. Last year, I split the beating coach responsibilities with Yara Miller, and I've been playing for 5 years, mostly with the University of Guelph, and then this past summer with the Raiders.
Perfect. Awesome. Now that we know our guests and who we're talking with, we'll kind of get into the main gist of the podcast. So we just have a couple kind of more directional kind of questions to just kind of get the conversation going. So for starters, obviously the Toronto Raiders are expansion franchise in the MLQ, which is great. So maybe just to start, if you want to kind of like discuss maybe a little bit about the opponents you guys play with. Obviously you guys are in the North Division, so a little bit different than what we see in the East. So maybe just kind of briefly talk about some of the opponents you guys play in terms of strengths, weaknesses, kind of who you guys kind of maybe have a rivalry with going on. I know it's only been a year, but like if you want to kind of briefly touch on that.
Zach, you wanna take a stab at it?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, last year was our first season with the MLQ, and it was a blast. That's for sure. It was a lot of fun. The North Division is really, really competitive. There's a lot of parity among the teams. One team that I would say, in terms of like competitive rivalry, we really had was Minneapolis. Those games were really tight. Was it all three of them that?
Yes.
Every single
10?
one.
Yeah, all three of those games came down to that kind of last goal. Those were really, really intense, exciting games. And we also had a lot of fun, I'd say, with Cleveland. Those were some really fun games, and a few of their players stuck around after and hung out with us. And that was a blast.
I feel like it's less like rivalries and more like friendships with competition sprinkled in.
I don't know. Minnie wasn't too happy with our hitting.
That was a hard weekend to be fair to them. I mean, it was hard for us as well. Most of our players were coming off of Pan American games, which had been just the weekend prior, in equally punishing Richmond heat, and then we very quickly went into deeply punishing Indianapolis heat. So it was an exhausting time. I know, like, I was at the same time really excited about playing so many close games, and also getting like so frustrated that literally every game was going to that last goal.
Oh.
So it made for some extremely intense Quidditch moments for sure. I thought we made a big splash in our first year. for an expansion franchise. It's weird because even in talking to some of the other MLQ teams and their coaches and managers, it doesn't feel like we're new to the scene. It feels like we have, established a bit of an identity really quickly, and we're able to make those relationships really quickly. So I think that's helped to sort of integrate us into the league.
I have a couple questions real quick. So the first one, so who was the fourth team in your division alongside Minneapolis and what else you mentioned?
Indianapolis. So we had Indianapolis, Minneapolis, Detroit, and Cleveland, and us.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then, so like after playing one season in MLQ, like what's your biggest takeaway from that experience playing against like American teams in a full summer league season?
The takeaway in terms of, my takeaway in terms of the game, in terms of my personal experience of the game, is that there's just still so much room for the sport to grow as an athlete, so much room for me to grow, so much room for like Canadian Quidditch to evolve broadly. So like, some broad takes from having the opportunity to have that exposure. But again, even in conversation with other Quidditch teams, I think, other MLQ teams rather, I think they also feel similarly that, that MLQ itself kind of creates that really unique experience of Quidditch, even for players that have been playing, for years in the States or for years in, other international competitions. So I think there's a unique kind of perfect storm of factors that make MLQ such an exciting product. And then another big takeaway for me is how fun is it to not play in like minus 20 weather? That's always probably the best. Yeah.
You get the flip side of it though when you're playing in 35-degree heat and you can't hold the balls because you're sweating too much.
Yeah.
See, Yara and Zach, I was with you guys for both Pan Ams and the Indy tournament. Which weekend was hotter? Because like they were both brutal.
Yeah, Pan Ams was really bad.
I want to say they were like different bad. I don't know. I really thought like I was doing okay in Indianapolis, and then like at the end of the tournament, my extremely precocious teammates decided it would be a kind gesture to throw a giant trash bucket of ice water on me at the end, and the temperature dropped. Like I thought that I had just like dropped into the bottom of the ocean. So I was like, oh, I didn't realize how hot I was running that whole weekend. But wow. I also was like trying to like, you when you're playing in like extremely difficult conditions, you sort of talk yourself into be like, this is fine. Like I'm fine. Everything's good. So I'm sure I just lied to myself for both weekends actually.
They were both about the same. Like they were both about 35, I think, on the thermometer. But I would say Indy was a lot more humid and a lot sweatier. So I probably preferred Richmond. Definitely a more bearable heat.
We also had a much smaller roster in Indianapolis. That exacerbated the situation somewhat. But
yeah,
16 going in. How many coming out? Less than that for sure.
17.
Was it 17? Sorry.
That's all the new friends we made.
Oh yeah.
Just one. Just one new friend. Yeah.
Oh. But yeah,
awesome.
Good times. Good times.
Nice.
Okay, so we kind of started slowly talking about it. So we'll move into like sort of thoughts on playing in the MLQ in general, I guess. So I think the big one for a lot of people, and I think it's really important for people that like us who have played in MLQ to really kind of promote it, is to see the aspect of summer training. So kind of promoting that to university and community teams to really play in the summer, because like you said, why wouldn't you want to play Quidditch when it's a little bit warmer? And obviously you don't want to be crazy hot, but like, I mean, it makes sense. Like we play all these other sports in the summer, and then we start our own QC season, and then it's freezing and we're always playing in it's what seems to be wet and snowy weather. So like we'll kind of maybe talk about that. And then also we kind of touched on it a little bit as well, but playing against more of the experienced US type players, I personally find that they kind of, in general, I guess, is they're a little more physical maybe than some of the Canadian teams you might kind of come up against. So maybe talk a little about that, and then also thoughts on like future Canadian expansion in MLQ and if we'll see that anytime soon. So I don't know if who wants to go first with this one, but that was a lot there.
Lots on package.
A lot
I
to unpack.
I think that what was the first one? Can we
So,
go
like,
one
just,
at a
like-
time, Gabe?
Just like thoughts on like thoughts on like just summer training in general. So what do you think about playing MLQ for? How is I guess a better question is like how has it improved your game during the summer? Is a more general question. Being able to play in the summer.
I thought that playing through the summer was really, really good. I think that there was kind of that sweet spot in the spring where the weather was really mild, and so you weren't like fighting the weather to kind of be at your best. It was really easy to perform as well as you can because you weren't cold or you weren't too hot. So I thought that was really good for skills training. But I think the best thing for it was just that we were kind of bringing together a lot of top talent from Southwest Ontario. And so I thought that our practices were really, really competitive and intense. And I think that was really the best part of it, was that we were regularly challenging ourselves against other top players from our area rather than kind of just playing against them in games every once in a while. So I thought that was a really, really exceptional part of the experience.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Zach. Like being able to build better relationships with people that we're normally playing against in the regular season, I think. And like, it was funny for me how some of that intensity in the competitions, like for example, to use like the age-old example of Guelph and Valhalla, to like take the intensity that I always feel playing against Guelph players and then to be able to translate that into playing alongside some of those players was, I think, really cool. And it like gave me an even better appreciation for some of the other programs that exist in Southwest Ontario and for those players, like all of those players that frustrate me so much because they're so talented and I always have to be playing against them. Like what a delight it is to be able to play alongside them. In terms of like the impacts of summer and like a summer season, I think like weather presents particularly unique challenges for Canadian Quidditch, and in a lot of the conversations about, you know, what's possible for the sport and how the sport can expand and grow, that sometimes I find like even I'll forget like, yeah, all of that is great, except it snows from September to March. So depending on where you are in the country, right? So it's even thinking about like the traditional like year cycle of any athlete for any sport, right? You have like your off season, your preseason, your regular season, and then your postseason, and how all of that plays together. And Quidditch, like a lot of Quidditch athletes don't have an off season because you're just playing from September to September year round. So this being my first year in MLQ, I know a lot of players on the Raiders had played for Rochester when they were still based in the north, or even some players who had like, you know, just the experience of watching or attending MLQ championships. This was like last year was my first year doing any of that, and so figuring out even how to adjust my training schedule and like, okay, so when am I gonna, how does my weight training and my agility training, my speed training fit into that? What recommendations as a coach should I be making so that people are capitalizing on the fact that you can go outside and run as part of your training schedule? Like that's not something I can do in December, but like you can do that now. So how do we make the most of that experience?
I'll chime in as well. Like I love what you said, Yara, about like, yeah, you have that cycle throughout the year of like, you do this, you start the season, you ramp up, you get better, you have your big kind of like first big tournament, regionals, you take a little time off, you start ramping up again for that big finals push and go and hit nationals, and then before this, really, we just had a big break throughout the summer, maybe a fantasy tournament or two, and I think like early on, a lot of us were doing that, and if we didn't have IQA to play for, or we didn't go and play for Rochester or Black Bears, you would kind of feel like you're like missing a step when you come back. Like you're a step slower than everyone else. And having that chance to kind of keep going and push yourself and try new things and have a new kind of challenge to reach for really, really helped. Obviously, you got to get your rehab in there and make sure your body's feeling okay. But assuming like physically everything's fine, like it really, you come into the next year and you're just feeling on top of your game. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like an adrenaline rush to play in that first. It's an adrenaline rush to play in that first MLQ game, and then even to come back in the regular season for QC and be like, I've been playing for 4 months. Like, I am ready for this moment, and just feeling like so energized. And so the period, it was weird because normally the period of time between when you last play an official game at nationals and then when you start up again in September is so long that you almost forget what it's like to, like, you know, brooms up, right? Like that anxiety is like for me anyway, I'm like always working through that at the beginning of the season. But then this past year in September 2019, I was like, it's been 2 weeks and I'm like, I need to like get back on the field. Like it's been way too long. I was concussed at the end of the last season. So that time was extended for me somewhat, but the more it's extremely addictive. Like the more you play, the more you want to play. Which I think MLQ does a good job of getting people hooked in that way.
Yeah, and I think another aspect of that too was playing against such challenging competition regularly at practice, and then almost even more so in our games against other teams, really pushed us to learn new things and expand our play styles. And so I was really excited to take a lot of the things that I learned in the MLQ season and bring them to QC and see how they translated.
And even like on the flip side of that, testing have the things that we've learned in QC, will that actually be useful to us in MLQ? And like, I think it was, you know, like years playing like stitch range games against Guelph have prepared me to play 6 games in a row with a 10-point cap. Like I am ready for this moment, you know? So
I still vouch that like out of the 3 like expansion teams from 2019, we brought the most entertainment value based on those five in a row of just like do or die matches. Like it was right there, always like pedal to the metal. It was awesome.
I remember
in a strong social media game.
Yes.
That's
we're always getting that shout out anytime I talk to Ethan Sturm. He's like, yeah, your social media game is on point. And I was like, but what about our actual game? Also on point. I remember I talked to Ethan shortly after that indie series, and he was saying how Ethan is being the commissioner of the league, one of the co-commissioners of the league, and he was saying how I think we were the feature series that weekend, or at least a widely watched series that weekend. And of course, as the commissioner, he watches all the games. And so he was watching, you know, game after game of the Raiders, like getting back into that, like the other team catches a snitch. Okay, the Raiders are now going to crawl back and score 6 in a row and like make it another 10-point game. And he said he was messaging other MLQ staff being like, this rule set is amazing. We're so smart. Like, look how entertaining this game is. And yeah, I think our expansion team helped to like sell a lot of the changes that were like really new to MLQ at that time, you know, with the set score and all of those new rule changes that 2019 brought.
Yeah, and even to go even further on that, like the rule set was something that made coming back to QC more interesting, because it wasn't, we were playing quidditch, like we were still playing the same game, but it was different enough that it felt fresh in the summer and then fresh to come back to in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Did you two find that like you were always tagging back in on middle hoops still? Because I did. I had a bad problem with that for a while.
I did all the time.
Zach, you're always like, what's the most efficient way to get from point A to point B? I thought the hardest part was in Pan Am when we were still playing, like, I was like deeply ingrained in the MLQ rule set, and then right smack dab in the middle of our MLQ season to play with the IQA rule set. And like, fortunately, I never got carded for 2-arm tackling, but though it was a close call several times, but I think I tagged back into the middle hoop that whole weekend because some things are just force of habit.
Yeah.
So on the topic then of like the MLQ rulebook, I guess we'll kind of go into that then. Is there any sort of rules you liked more than others? Some rules you didn't like? Like I know obviously the big one is 2-arm tackling. Unlike yourself, Yara, I did get carded for 2-arm tackling when I came back to QC right away. It's so much better, and we've had so many conversations about 2-arm tackling, and we pray to God that it eventually makes its way into QC. But Is there anything that kind of stands out for you? I know that you also mentioned the set scores. From a viewer standpoint, watching you guys with them like the championship weekend, like it's fantastic to watch. It's super exciting. But is there anything that kind of stands out for you guys in terms of sort of MLQ's rulebook, I guess?
I don't know that there's a rule I don't like in MLQ. Zach, is there any like beater? How do you feel about what the heck is it called? When you
Swatting.
That's the one. I'm just like
swatting.
Swatting a fly.
I love swatting. I used it so many times to draw cards. Do you remember in that League City game? I got 2 chasers carded for swatting within like 20 seconds.
Wow.
I do.
And I got
remember
one
that.
to straight chaser, but it didn't get called. I yelled at Sean for that. I invited him to ref, and then I yelled at him for not calling a swat.
I remember that.
The only thing that I think I didn't love is, the tagging in the middle hoop is great, but I don't think beaters should have to do it. That's kind of my thing. Like, I think it's indifferent, and that would reduce some clogging, but at the same time, it does make it easier to recover, but also it makes it easier to be recovered again. So it's balanced.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say
that... Go ahead.
I was gonna say, with that, I think when I'm with kind of gameplay for QC, and like when we talk about implementing something similar to that, the only I think issue is officiating, like the beater tag in, because like you can watch and see everyone has to go here, everyone's going to middle hoop, like side hoops don't matter. But when you say like these people can go here, but these people are allowed to go here, and I could see the difficulty in reffing it. It would. I agree. I don't think that's necessarily like a bad idea at all. I think it's just the implementation would be difficult for the refs. But yeah, I would say I'm not a big fan of swatting. That's because I'm not good at it, and I don't think I saw it implemented as much this year. Given like with 2-arm tackling, I think that was the like showstopper. Like it really put on a pedestal like this is how you can run a defense, and defense is huge. Like it really just kind of put itself out there and was great.
Yeah, and I think something that doesn't get talked about enough with 2-arm tackling is how it changes the beater game, because when chasers are allowed to 2-arm tackle, we as beaters can trust our chasers more to make stops and make hits, so we can almost focus more on the beater game, and it almost separates the two phases of the game a little more, because there are definitely times in QC where like I'll use Bryan or even Gabe as an example, who are really talented drivers, are kind of coming down the middle, and we know that we have to key bludgers on them, and we can't focus on the other beaters, because if we don't, you guys are going to drive in and score through 1-arm tackles. But when 2-arm tackling gets brought in, we can have a little bit more faith in our defensive chasers and can play a little more in the beater game.
Yeah, I was just going to mention about the middle hoop, like tagging in. Like for a chaser on defense, I find it's harder to defend just because you could be running down trying to tag it back in as someone's going on the breaker, but you have to go to that middle hoop and they can kind of steer off to the side hoop and then get the easy goal. So I found like a lot of the rule changes helped increase offense and also made defense, also increase defense too with the 2-hand tackling, but by like spreading the hoops wider, it allows for players to take those long shots, which also helped, I guess, improve the offensive side of the game as well and kind of keeping the scores higher than normal.
And I think I said this like to you, Yara, last year when we were at tryouts. I remember like as a keeper, like I'm always right in front of those hoops, and I like pop myself down, and I was like, okay, you're a little bit of 18 inches farther apart either direction. That's nothing. I can handle that. And I think like the first shot someone threw, and it like I reached my hand out, and it like whizzed by the like past my fingertips, and I'm like, that's in.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Like
this like an imaginary like gust of wind going by you. Yeah, I don't envy keepers at all, because I find your job is already so challenging, especially like elite shot blockers, like people like Custers, like Jake Archibald, the people that can block consistently. Like I'm looking at players like that going like, aren't you just guessing where the quaffle is going to go every time? And like, how are you guessing at such a successful rate? So I think that like the rule changes were in part to try and balance the game. So like, okay, we're going to introduce 2-arm tackling, that's going to slow the game down significantly unless we make some other adjustments that allow the offense to flow more smoothly. And then Zach, to your point earlier around the impacts on the beater game, I completely agree with you. And I felt like I could trust our Quaffle players to be more creative on the defensive end. And I remember like our coaching team last year with the defenses that we designed, it was sort of with that idea that we were going to allow our beaters to do, to create like havoc or like, you know, make a mess, make a muck, if you will, of what is happening on the field and be more chaotic in that way because of what two-arm tackling allowed our chasers to do. And it delighted players like, you know, I know Spencer Van Milligan unfortunately didn't play MLQ, but I was messaging him when that rule was announced, and he's the one that taught me how to tackle, and he was like, Yara, you're gonna have so much fun this year. Like, so I think athletes that came to Quidditch because they were attracted to that idea of a different kind of full contact sport have been waiting for a product that shows what two-arm tackling can look like, and yeah, it really delivered.
Yeah, for sure. And so kind of build on that as well, two things. So one would be, did you guys notice because of the two-arm tackling, was there like more emphasis on defensive sets in MLQ? Obviously, I think one thing that I really like about the American game is oftentimes I feel like they're a little more organized than some of the teams you see in QC in terms of like their defensive organization, I guess. And I think the midline we talk about a lot here, obviously, like that's a great opportunity for a lot of developing teams to learn about those different defensive sets. But did you guys seem to find that there was more emphasis on the defensive set? And then also we want to get your thoughts on like the shot clock. We kind of briefly talked about that in another episode, but what do you guys think about the idea of having a shot clock to kind of speed up the game to kind of counteract this, I guess, the reduced speed of the game with the two-arm tackling?
So in terms of defense, like the one thing I'll say when comparing the American and the Canadian game as like generalized products is that it's really important to remember that the American game draws from a pool that's about 20 times the size of the Canadian game. So like the games that we're watching, you know, in terms of USQ's Final Four or, you know, MLQ championships, we're talking about like the 10th percentile of many teams. You know, Valhalla has had a chance to play some of them. I know when Guelph invited a Rochester team to their tournament a few years ago, other Canadian teams got to play some of them. And so it's not, I would say it's not really like a unilateral thing that Americans have like an organized defense and Canadians like have a different style of play. I think it's more just so in terms of the numbers, because if you look at like the top teams in Canada, like if you look at Guelph, if you look at Storm Crows, they have extremely creative defenses and they organize their defense around the personnel that build their roster. And around the rules as well, right? Like, I know like a coach like Austin Wallace is constantly thinking about, as any coach should be, this is the rule set. How am I going to manipulate this rule set to stop every goal that's being scored against me? And so I think the idea of two-arm tackling just presents that question with like that asterisk of like, all right, my goal is to stop all of the goals that are trying to be scored against me. Here are all of the tools at my disposal via the rule book, two-arm tackling being one of them. All right, now let's see what we can do with that. With like the top MLQ teams, you have like Austin. It comes from like a very rich culture of defense. Like a lot of players have like football backgrounds and like there's a big tackle heavy culture. So like I think that Austin Outlaws probably present like one of the best Quidditch defenses like ever. I would put like Australia's national team up there. But like if you look at some of the mid-tier and lower tier teams in MLQ, I would say like the Raiders are right there with them, if not, I'm going to say selfishly, like probably better than them, right? And like able to compete with them and outthink and be more creative with how we beat them. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like I forgot what the question is, but like I'm a very like defensive minded person. So like two-arm tackling for me is like, like uncovering gold for the first time. Like, it's like so much like rich gameplay that can be developed because of that. I don't know, Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that, and something that I especially noticed playing against some of the top talent in the U.S. and watching film as well, is that they really thrive on sort of patience and composure under pressure and poking and prodding at the defense until they find the opening that they want. And I think that's something that we really haven't had in Quidditch Canada for a while. I know, Brian, if you remember the early days with Guelph, when our offense was literally basically called organized chaos.
Yeah.
And we were just trying to create a mess and then hope that we got a goal out of it, or hope that we got a stop on defense out of the chaos. So I think that that's something that, at least over time, with involvement in the Team Canada program and bringing top athletes together and then taking things from other parts of the world and integrating them in and learning from MLQ and the other teams, we've sort of created more organization within our offense and defense and trended towards that sort of more patient and planned strategy for our offenses and offensive and defensive sets. And a shot clock, Gabe, to answer that question, I think it would be really interesting to see how the top teams who really, really are patient and don't rush anything ever and sort of are content to sit until you make a mistake and then exploit it. I think it would be really interesting to see how they react to that shot clock and to see how the game changes from that. But I don't know that it would necessarily be beneficial, just in terms of it might force a lot of rushed possessions. And I think that the best possessions that I've seen all come from really, really planned patience and sort of waiting for that opportunity and striking on it really quickly.
And to that point, like I think it's worth making a distinction between a patient offense and a slow offense, because there are like, I've certainly played against opponents that are like, we're going to take our time walking up the pitch, and now we're going to go back, and now we're going to take our time again walking up the pitch, and you're just like waiting on the other side of the midline being like, just cross the pitch already, and like losing my mind.
I feel targeted.
So-
that's Kyle
Spinning
Ross
a
has talked to me
quaffle,
a million
finger.
times, like, Brian, we are
Worse.
going to change this rule. We're not going to let you walk to the very corner of the pitch because it allows you to. You got to manipulate those rules. Like, if I have like 50 feet of rope, I'm gonna use 49 and 11 inches.
Sure.
Like,
yeah, absolutely.
don't go
You
out,
do
but gotta do it.
No hate whatsoever from this side. Not for that anyway. I have some other some other bones to pick with your offense, but that's not one of them. But the no, I kid, of course. But with the like a patient offense, like they want to get in position, right? So they're gonna cross midline, and then they're gonna cycle the ball. They're gonna run pick and rolls. They're gonna make good cuts. Their beaters are gonna be engaging with the other beaters. They're not just standing there. So yeah, I agree that like while a shot clock would be interesting, I don't know that it would necessarily create a better product. But
it would really, really force the defense, because it would force offenses into taking possessions that they don't want or pushing opportunities that they don't want and sort of rushing into things. And I think it would be really, really advantageous on defense. Whereas I think now with, not that the top offenses are necessarily just like taking their time, but like Yara said, and what I said at first was like they're poking and prodding. So they're kind of trying to create and look for opportunities and then exploit those. So they're always kind of in attack mode and looking to strike and score, but they're not just rushing at the first slim chance they see. They're taking the first good chance, or they're taking the chance that they want when they create it.
Mm-hmm.
I would add to that, like, I think watching Boston, a lot of what I've seen was like almost Boston, Indianapolis, San Antonio, they all run completely different things, but it's almost like establishing position. We want this angle, we want this thing. We see an option, are we going to take it? Maybe not. Let's find another one. Mm-hmm. Okay, is this better? Yeah, I like this. You go in and strike. And, like, there's the patience and the know-how of we're going to move the ball and get what we want, and we're going to get our goal. And it's simple as that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
For sure. That's awesome. Okay, so we'll kind of switch gears here then. Move into sort of kind of where we see things going for the current season. Obviously, with everything going on, we don't want to get too political with some of the like ideas about whatever. But I think the more interesting question would be, would you guys want to see an MLQ Canada exclusive series? I know personally, I think that would be super cool. I think I look to like MLS where they have the Canadian Championship, where you have TFC and the Montreal Impact and Vancouver all kind of coming together and like having the bragging rights of who's the best in Canada. Would you guys gonna be interested in having that kind of series, whether it be just a regular super series or having like a home and away kind of like series? What are your thoughts on doing that?
Zach, feel free to.
Sure, I can start this one off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we did the exhibition series before the season
Yeah.
started in the spring last year, and that was a blast. That was so much fun and a great way to sort of kick off the season. So I think that I would be really down for that to happen every single year. I don't know if there's room to fit it within the actual MLQ schedule, especially if there's plans to have Pan Ams and or World Cup every single year. I think that adding an extra official MLQ series would be really, really challenging, but I liked sort of that friendly competition of an exhibition series for both teams to tune up, see where they stand, try some things out, and then fine-tune them going into their actual season. And in terms of this year, I hope things get to a point where we can have that kind of a series, but I think that it's got to be really, really safe for that to happen. For sure. There's, as much as we all want to play and all want to have fun, we got to make sure that we're not risking anything to do that.
Yeah, I'm just thumbs up to everything you said. I think I may have loved that exhibition series even more because there wasn't the pressure or the expectation that we should be like actively out to kick each other's butts or whatever. Like for sure there's a bit of a to Gabe, to your point of like, wanting to have the bragging rights of who's the best Canadian team. But I especially was treating that as like a learning opportunity. It was really our first MLQ games really were against the Black Bears. So like as the coach of the Raiders, I see them as like an older sibling in the franchise, as someone who's like had the opportunity to really learn from the league and learn from the other teams. And so like I was talking to the Black Bears coaches last year when we met, just trying to like soak up as much information as possible. And it's really nice not to be in the same pool as them because, throughout the season we can message each other and be like, so what do you folks think of this strategy? Did you see what Rochester is trying out? Have you seen what like San Antonio is doing? And being able to have that dialogue without feeling like we have to hoard our secrets from each other. So, so it's nice to have that relationship with the Black Bears for sure.
Yeah, and some of us had a little too much fun the night before, right, Brian?
Oh god, there's some players out there who just don't
What
seem
happened,
to. You know what? It's a lot of what matters is what happens on pitch. I think if you really show what you have, that's what matters. You rock some like sweet merch from Kawhi. This one like time of filming. This is like the 1 year anniversary of the shot.
Of the shots.
That's
right.
I think that's the more important thing. You go out there and play. It doesn't matter what happens off pitch. It's all what's on pitch.
Very, very convenient.
And you know what though? But like whatever happened last year, that's in the past. And now I'm somewhat of your equals, at least to Zach. I don't think we mentioned I'm assistant coach with these two. They're stuck with me.
They didn't introduce you. They didn't introduce you as assistant coach, Brian. So does that mean we take that away?
Zach wasn't introduced either. He was rehired, but he wasn't reintroduced. So like both of us, we're sitting in the same story. So if you want to like get me, you got Zach as well. Like it's 2 for 1.
I think. Oh, go ahead, Zach.
I was just going to say, we've got some philosophical differences, Brian, about it not mattering what happens off the pitch.
Well, like, Zach, we tried out at the same time 5 years ago. And, like, we've been through so much, so, like, you got something, I got something back. Touche. So simple as that. I think we could. I think
if I'm gonna fire shots at you, you can fire them right back at me. That's how I feel about
please.
face beat. If I hit you in the face with a bludger, you can hit me right back. I won't do that.
Yeah, but I can't hold a bludger. Therefore, it's unfair. It's very simple. You pick up a bludger and throw it at my face. You laugh.
Yeah.
I pick up a bludger and throw it at you. I get a card for not knowing how to play the game.
Sounds like you picked the. You could swat it.
Well, I could, except I would probably get a card for illegal swatting. So I'll leave the defensive side and like swatting tactics to you, yeah. Like my one goal of swatting in MLQ is for someone like a beater to like be throwing it back from our side. I turn around and I spike it back toward our end, and then they have to run all the way back and then run all the way back to get it. Like that's my extent of what I want out of swatting. Defensively, you can use whatever creative idea you got, and I'm down for it. But offensively, let's just get the ball in the net or the hoop. That's step 1, step 2 done.
We're really distilling this down to its most basic, most basic principles. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Get ball, score.
Well, I trust you to be basic, Bryan.
Oh,
You know it. That's my job.
is that a shot?
I also can't hold a bludger. I can't take any shots either.
Yeah.
Okay, so then on the topic then of like Canadian MLQ Quidditch, with regards to like expansion, I guess if there was to be an expansion, where would you like to see expansion? Where do you think the most realistic like next location for expansion might be? Is it Montreal? Is it going to be out west? Hopefully MLQ can reestablish the West Division. What are your thoughts on expansion for MLQ in Canada?
I would love to see Western Canada get an MLQ team. There's, I think, a couple really good options for where that could be. The two places I'm thinking are, Vancouver currently has 4 QC league teams with SFU, Stormcrows, Viper Tooths, and UBC. So that's a lot of players. Yeah, yeah, true. I'm thinking like more like even just like in the city of Vancouver. Not to diss UVic, of course. Respect to UVic. But yeah, with UVic, that would be 5 teams in BC. That would be local to that area. And I know Calgary has a really great and finely tuned farm system. They have like various levels of developmental Quidditch happening in Calgary, from youth Quidditch to rec Quidditch, and they have good relationships with the city as well. So that I think that could be another great place, and it's not too far from the border. So I don't know, it would be great. But if they were to put another team out east, it would be cool to get one in Montreal as well. Okay, I hadn't even thought about that. That'd be a great idea.
Yeah, I would say I'd also like to see a team out west, just because for the east, with the Black Bears at least, like we draw from both Montreal and Kingston. So I feel like if we separated Ottawa, Kingston, and then Montreal, I feel like it may be a bit difficult for the Black Bears to kind of build a roster.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it would also be cool to have another team out east as well.
That's a good point.
I definitely agree with that adding another team in the East, although I think we could support it in terms of the number of players we have. I think it would really, really dilute the amount of the talent of the rosters and the amount of players that we have. So I think the next step for Canada should definitely be somewhere out west, hopefully, if that division comes back. It's obviously a challenge for Quidditch, but, all sports suffer from this problem of the West Coast, the major cities being fairly spread apart and there being a lot of travel problems. In the NFL, I know the schedule just got released, and I think Seattle or other West Coast teams have the most travel versus a team like Baltimore where they travel. I think Seattle flies more in one trip than Baltimore does all season or something like that.
R.I.P.
Wow.
Vancouver Grizzlies.
Yeah.
maybe they'll come back.
Who knows? One day.
I had an idea that was like kind of like what you said, Yara, but slightly different. The original, like before MLQ division, like the Western Division was disbanded, the 3 teams that were left were what? LA. There was, who were the other 2? Do you happen to remember?
With the West Coast?
Yeah. San Fran.
Salt Lake.
Yeah, Utah area, which is good.
Is it Boise? I feel like I heard about
Boise. I was gonna say
They
Boise.
disbanded.
Boise, yeah, Boise
I
was the
wasn't
team
sure,
that was
but-
disbanded. Yeah.
Yeah, they made some headlines, I think.
Yeah.
I was thinking of if you want to throw you want to make it 5 in each, you could throw Vancouver in there, and then somehow you do like a Seattle. So you have a nice close like rivalry developing there, and that really can you're not really gonna be sharing a ton of players. You kind of split it at the border, but you can have a really easy rivalry for teams to we don't have to travel far. Let's go across the border. We play each other. Awesome. I think
And
that
that's
would be good to
already
see.
that competition already happens too with they call it QCon, so the Western Conference of Quidditch that happens out west. And so it would be cool to see some of those rivalries and storylines extend throughout the summer on a bigger stage.
Yeah, and the distance up the coast isn't too far off from what we have with Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
And so far that's been managed pretty well. I feel. I mean, I think Minnie had to travel a lot last year, but it's the distance is pretty well similar, I think.
I think the use of Super Series in that scenario is probably the best way to use it when you have a team that's a little bit farther off from everyone else, from the center of the area. You can kind of put something that's a little bit of travel for them, but a lot of travel or a fair amount of travel for 2 other teams to kind of equal it out and kind of disperse the pain of traveling really far. But it's I don't know. I'm looking forward to playing, and if you gotta drive another 8 hours, me and Zach went through our 12-hour trips of hell.
Yes.
Pan Ams.
Those are a blast.
Oh, and then Pan Am road trip, and then the unintended MLQ Championship road trip with Lucille.
Yeah, that one wasn't
Sorry
fun.
about it.
That was Zach. It wasn't funny because you did drive. Well, you did. You were on the phone for 3 hours getting us our flights, which was quite a
and
great
then I
conversation.
didn't get kickbacks for my flights. I only got them for you and Stevie.
Oh yeah, forgot about that.
Everyone has a role to play in the journey to championships, that's for sure.
Awesome. Okay, so then I think we'll wrap up this kind of segment before we go into the Chill Vibes segment. We wanted to ask if there was one thing you wish that there was available to MLQ as athletes, what would it be? So, because some of the things I had here were expansion. Obviously, that'd be kind of cool. Professional coverage of MLQ games, particularly for championship weekend. I don't know if you guys have seen some of the QPL, which is the British version of the MLQ, and some of the coverage they have there for some of their games is really, really cool. Or would it be just more funding to make it more of a semi-pro, a traditional semi-pro sport? Those are some of the ideas I had, but feel free to kind of add in anything that you think would be relevant or nice to have as an athlete in MLQ or a coach.
Go ahead.
You go.
No. I insist.
Infighting already.
No, you go.
This is that Raiders camaraderie on the screen for you all right here. that respectability, Canadian respectability.
While Brian sits in the corner.
All right. So I would say West Coast expansion would be really, really amazing. I think that would be really great for growing the sport in Canada as a whole, and sort of equaling out the coasts, just because they would have more opportunities to play competitive Quidditch in the summer, which we in the East have had for a little while now. And then I think I like the idea. I don't know about necessarily that it needs more funding. I think that would obviously be amazing. Any funding that additional would be great. But I think that I think it's good where it's at right now, and progressing. I was watching. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's very niche, but it's a Netflix drama, The English Game. It's a British football drama. It's a period piece, and it's about the beginnings of soccer in England. And I was kind of watching it, and I was like, this isn't too different from what's going on in Quidditch right now, like how the sport's kind of growing and becoming more recognized within around the globe and within the country. So I think that that's a really interesting comparison. It really is a sport in its infancy that is getting more credibility and growing, and I think that it's only going to grow from here.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely second a West Coast expansion, at not only as like a Canadian player, but like as the ED of QC. I would love if that opportunity were made available to our Western region. As an athlete, like selfishly, maybe not necessarily professional coverage, but it would be great if we could just get high quality film of every game. I want to keep the bar real low. Not just as a player, but as a coach. Like, I really rely on film to understand, grow my understanding of the game, to grow my players' understanding of the game. So yeah, if that means we got to hover like a drone over the field or whatever, like I'll pay to make it happen. Just let me know.
Yara, I'm right there with you. Someone just get a big stick and put a camera on top, and then we're good. I think MLQ does it like what we've seen at like MLQ championships with that elevated pitch cam.
Yeah,
it's amazing, and it changes watching film, and it makes it so much easier to kind of just pick apart like, this is where they're going, this is how they're attacking, what are the lanes, what's going on, and it just kind of opens up the game that makes it so much more accessible for the viewer.
So much more watchable, because you're able to see like so much of what's impacting the game is often happening off screen, and so anything that you could do to make that to create like that understanding for the audience would be really incredible. Yeah.
It was nice to actually be able to see beater play for once, and not just assume what happened.
Just rely on memory alone. Yeah, like even Bryan, when we were talking about swatting earlier, there's that one play from the 2018 MLQ Championship where I forget which game it was. Of course, it was Boston and Austin, the age-old rivalry, but it was exactly what you were describing, where one beater was trying to recover a bludger, so they threw it back home, and then an opposing chaser ran midfield and like swatted the bludger back. It was such a cool sequence, and you had to have been like, that camera had to be 6 feet off the ground for you to see it, otherwise you would have caught it. So
I believe Teddy Costa did it in the 2019 championship somewhere. I remember seeing that this past year as well. It's phenomenal. It's, I think, one of my favorite like defensive plays in the offensive zone that's possible. Just random smack.
For sure.
It's a really cool swatting is really, really cool, because it allows the chasers to influence beater play a little bit more and maybe give their beaters a hand. Like if you're good enough at it, you can kind of redirect the ball to your beaters. So for example, if I were to try and bludger cycle and just chuck a bludger at a chaser might dodge and let that beat roll off pitch, and then their beaters have to just hustle after it and chase it down. But a smart chaser might just take it and direct it back to their hoops, where their beaters are going to be easily able to pick it up. So I think it really, really changes the game in that way. And it also makes tap beats much more challenging, whereas they're usually a pretty easy and free play and hard to dodge. You have to really think about it before you make it.
I think in general, it forces players to be better decision makers, both as quaffle players and beaters, which that's what I want, is all of our players to just grow their brains about the game. It's a weird way of putting that, but I stand by it.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll wrap up that sort of main discussion then for the podcast, and we'll move into our last sort of segment here. We call it Chill Vibes Only segment. Obviously, the three of us being with you on the water, that was kind of our mantra, I guess. So we have two sort of like sort of games or like ideas we can kind of go with. We can either do the QC money game, which was kind of adopted ironically from MLQ. So we can do that, or we can do, I can kind of pick one of the questions here that I have from a list, and we can wrap up with that. So I don't know if you guys got a chance, or if you guys have a preference of what you want to do for this.
I'm happy with either, but I made what I believe is the best team. Like I stand by this roster. I would live and die by this roster.
That's what we're playing.
So if we go that way, I'm ready. But I love a good question. So
Whatever team you made, Yara, I promise mine will beat it.
Oh,
I have a quick proposition for another podcast. I would love to get a couple of the people we have had on for these, and hopefully soon we'll be releasing the actual footage from our episode with Darren Bell and Mark Evrod, and we actually did a snake draft of
Nice.
like who you get, or like who you pick, and you have the same restrictions of what we have, but have like 8 or 10 GMs going at it with a whole longer list of players, and we have the ultimate draft of random Canadian talent going against each other. But we'll limit ourselves just to what you have prepared in the face-off of Yara and Zach, and then Ryan will sit on the side, coming up with a last-minute team to throw at you. Has been.
Yara, do you want to go first so I can make faces at all your picks?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. I'll start with. I gotta be able to see your face while I say this, because that's an important part of the experience for me. Okay, so my beaters, Zach and Raph. I feel like
Zach, why would you pick him? He's so expensive.
I know,
I'm not
but
gonna pick that loser.
so this is. I was like in my experience playing Quidditch. Okay, this is going to be a weird metaphor, but just go with this. So when I was in junior high, I used to play the alto saxophone. And the reason that I played the alto saxophone is because the music teacher sold it to me by saying, this is an instrument that you could play upside down and you'll still get it right. You can have zero knowledge of the saxophone and you'll be fine. And that is what I feel like quaffle players are in Quidditch. You can have like no skill. You just need to be somewhat of an athlete, understand that the ball goes through the hoop, and you'll be okay.
You had a perfect opportunity to roast Zach, and you just missed it.
Nah. But you cannot win. The best beaters win the game. That is what I've learned every time. Seen it time and time again. And if I can get Zach and Raph playing on the same line in the same team, then I will get whatever chasers I get, like, will be just fine, because like, who's gonna score against Zach and Raph? Well, no one. When you find out my follow-up picks. So my keeper, Spencer Van Milligan, big sturdy guy, right? You're gonna be afraid to drive on him. It's at your own peril, so he'll be a good wall in front of the hoops. John Nicholson as my point defender, an absolute steal at $3 for that same reason, except he'll give you that lateral quickness that Spencer unfortunately doesn't always present. And then my wing chasers, Liesel Van Wyck, or Van Wyck, I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name. I just rewatched that McGill Queens consolation game from Eastern Regionals, and Liesel balled out. Actually, Gabe, I think she stole the ball from you.
Yeah, she did.
Once,
she
yeah.
Did.
Oh, wow.
That's the moment I recognize. I was like, because we played her earlier, and I was like, she was really good.
I would argue, real quick. I would argue probably the best game of Eastern Regionals 19.
It was such a great game. And she, like, watching her in that game, she can track a player on defense now better than many players can in their fourth or fifth years. And, like, she'll get, like, incredible, like, interceptions and steals. She even had, like, a block. So, like, you know, if Spencer is really bored of playing keeper and just wants to, like, hit someone in the outfield, we'll put Liesel back there. Like, it'll be great. And then at $1, our baby bell Darren, the offload point defender. So just picture this: Zach and Raph with Bludger control, and Spencer, John, Liesel, and Darren running down the field. Who is going to stop them? Who is going to score against them? Absolutely no one. Best team, hands down. I rest my case.
Rebuttal.
Yeah. Other than that Zach guy, that's a pretty solid team. I don't think I can really say anything about your team there. I definitely, I haven't had the opportunity to see Liesel play, but from what I've heard, I'm definitely gonna be paying attention next year because I've heard a lot of really good things. And Raph and I have played together at a few TC practices, and it's been pretty fun. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. I'm just trying to give the people what they want, Zach.
But unfortunately, yeah, I think I have a team that's gonna take you down here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna start with the beaters on the back end, and my two beaters are. You guys are gonna notice a lot of black. In my game. If you bring me back on, I'll do one where I don't pick any Guelph players, but I'm gonna pick a lot for this one. I'm going to take, with my first pick, and I think amazing value, the person who I think is the best beater in Canada, and that is Kaylin Beddings. Kaylin's just phenomenal. She just reacts so well in all situations. She's a pleasure to play with. I am so lucky to be her beater partner, and I think that's I'm comfortable with making that my first pick. In terms of any beater, I would pick Kaylin over everyone on that list. And then my second pick, I think I get great value with Ian. He's kind of lesser known, and especially I thought he was going to really, really blow up at regionals this year, and then he broke his nose in our second game and didn't get to play the rest of the tournament. But Ian's got a ton of speed, a ton of talent, and I was watching the midline breakdown of a Texas game the other day, and I think it was Kylie McBride and Tate that were out there. And I was literally watching this, and I was like, that looks like Ian and Kaylin. Obviously, I think Kylie and Tate are probably a bit better than Ian and Kaylin. They've been playing, at a higher level down in Texas for sure. But I'll take that any day. And then in terms of chasers, there's one chaser on this list that I really think is just an absolute game breaker, and that's Jeremy. I got to go with Jer. His feet are just so fast. He's a great point defender. He is literally indefensible. He led Eastern Regionals in scoring, and that was with Yi and I in his ear saying, hey, Jer, score less. Not score less, but pass more. The team can still score more, but you can score less individually. And then for my other two chasers, I've got two really, really talented chasers in Brooke Walker and Emma Sturratt, who I would say are both just absolutely fearless. They can both stand up to anyone on point defense. I know Emma is someone who was in her first year playing this year, and we, with only a few months of experience, we're leaning on her for big minutes in really, really tight competitive Eastern Regionals, day 2 games. And then Brooke is someone who's that experienced veteran. They both have great hands by the hoops, and they're just two really talented players who I'm comfortable playing in any situation. And then for my keeper, we're going to go with Alex Crawley, otherwise known as the long arm of the law. I really like his length at hoops, and I saw some really great passing from him at our tournament in the winter. So I think that lineup gives me sort of a diverse lineup with 4 qualified players who can ball handle, who work together well with great hands, and who can all probably drive as well. I've seen Emma drive fearlessly, and I think you, Brian.
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't be surprised.
And 2 really, really exceptional beaters who I have a lot of confidence in.
It's a pretty good line. And actually, we didn't double on any of our picks, so we could theoretically test this out. But you're not allowed to sabotage my team by being on the other side.
No, I'll play hard.
All right. And I'm coaching my team, so let's also keep that in mind.
While Zach also coaches his own team.
Yeah, he can coach and play. I'll allow it.
You will coach my team for me.
Ooh.
Who, me?
No, Yeezy.
Right.
Oh, easy. Nice. Yeah, I accept it.
Did you guys pick Seekers at all, or did you just do the $18 one?
I figured I would. I just did the 18, but I would slot Savannah in there and get to my 21 and clean that up with a top tier Seeker at $3.
I would take out Crawley and add Catton for a little more bulk for snitch on pitch, Liam Catton, and then my Seeker would be Michael Gomes, who is an amazing Seeker. And then, well, we're all Guelph, so.
Excellent. Yeah, that's one heck of a line, Zach. I almost envy it. Almost.
Yeah, it was pretty tough to play against, wasn't it, Yara?
Ooh.
Oh, I don't know. We were right in there.
I know.
Wait,
it was a good
that
game.
that was a great game. I mean, I talk a lot about playing Guelph, but they're my favorite games are playing against Guelph.
Yeah, there's nothing like that excitement of those like close snitch on pitch games. It was nice to not have as many of them as
This year?
past
Oh
years
yeah,
with
for
the National
sure.
Slide. Like I think
I
when
don't know
we played
though.
each other 3 times in a weekend,
3
it
times
really
in one
took away
tournament,
from
yeah. For sure. Though I wish, I wish we had played each other more in the season. I mean, obviously the season getting upended, like we lost half of our season with the pandemic. But like, every year, in as much as like the rivalries are kind of inherited from from year to year, I really try and treat every year as like a clean slate. And like I know like Valhalla had some pretty cool rookies this year. Guelph always, is able to recruit through their 2-team program. So it's nice to even like I'm always curious to see like, oh, I wonder what Guelph looks like this year. Like I wonder what they're going to be able to pull off. Like it's so frustrating being a fan of Guelph and also just like a rival to Guelph at the same time. Very disconcerting for my personality. So
Yeah, the sort of combination of Valfrey and Valhalla was definitely a scary prospect to think about because there was a lot of talent coming from Valfrey that was a big help to Valhalla this year. I think yourself included, Yara.
yeah.
And I think that they're definitely really, really, they're always really exciting games, and there's a good competitive rivalry. And I think that Raiders was something that really kind of made it much friendlier than it has been in the past. Definitely kind of bridged the 2 teams together.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I got a team I threw together at the last minute. I feel like it has a good theme. So, this team is called 5 Parents and a Kid. So, I decided to go for legitimately all the dads and moms out there who are like the parents of their teams, and I chose one child because I needed to squish it in, and I thought it fit thematically really well. So, first off, beaters. Felix and Jimmy. One's like theoretical dad. The other one literally is now a dad.
Nice.
So there you go. You have Yap, Team Mom. Yara, Team Mom, as for both Valhalla and Raiders, and I guess QC in general. Wes Mackey, the Big Daddy, the Wes Mackey, and then the child, Darren Baby Bell, and that's
Nice.
$18.
Nice.
And I think I could throw that team against yours. So 3-way Quidditch battle, bring it on.
Who's your second beater after Felix? Brian?
Jimmy Condon.
Oh, Jimmy Condon, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I have. And you know what? Yeah, 3-way Quidditch for the right of Raiders head coach. I feel like that.
Oh wow.
That is getting thrown down. The gauntlet is there.
Let's make it happen.
I'm so confident in this line that even doesn't scare me as a possible loss. It's been actually really fun watching different people play this game, and like it also makes me so sad that like not ever you obviously couldn't make like an all-encompassing game with all of the different players that are possible, but it's like served as a fun like weekly reminder for me of just how much talent the country has, and like it's been fun to see how different people put a line together. So yeah,
I have plenty
I've
of
enjoyed
vacation days, Yara. I can definitely find some time, and I can put my scouting work to due diligence.
All right, I'd like a 30 by 30 person spreadsheet for next week.
I will try my darndest, and I will expand.
Incredible.
All right, so I think we'll wrap it up there. I think that was a lot of fun. We just want to thank you guys really quickly for coming on the podcast. We like doing we want to try to bring a little bit of positivity to everything that's going on, especially with MLQ kind of being on hold right now. So we just want to thank you guys so much for coming on and giving us a little bit of Canadian MLQ content. And is there any other questions you guys have for us before we get going?
When are you guys gonna fire Bryan? He's clearly not pulling his weight here. So
Wow.
Maybe sooner rather than later. I don't know.
Hey, I do all the editing.
Very true.
Yeah,
Very
true. Yeah,
I can make
we'll
myself
have to-
sound as good as I want.
Yeah, they don't fire them. They just make them do the work that they don't want to do.
Smart. I could learn a few tips here. So
Oh, I'm really looking forward to this summer.
thank you so much for having us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no problem.
no problem.
No worries at all. So good luck with it. Hopefully we do have a season. If we do, we'll see you guys on the pitch, and all the best with the season. And yeah, thanks so much. And we'll be back for part 2 with the Ottawa Black Bears in a bit.
I was going up the coast in a minivan that broke, like my voice when I told you I was leaving.
Pack my bag up, take her home.